Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today because what I'm about to share with you is one of the most shocking and unbelievable coin stories ever connected to a simple everyday penny that most people would ignore without a second glance, and today that coin is the legendary 1988 1 cent that under the right combination of mistakes, minting chaos, production flaws, and extreme rarity could be valued as high as $4 million, and I want you to imagine for a moment how many times a coin just like this may have slipped through someone's fingers, spent for a piece of candy, dropped into a jar, or lost in a couch cushion without anyone realizing they were holding something that could change their entire life. And the reason this 1988 1 cent has reached such a staggering level of potential value is because it sits at a very strange intersection of minting technology transition, human error, metal composition anomalies, die deterioration, planchet mishaps, strike failures, and undocumented experimental variations that were never meant to reach circulation in the first place, and when you break it all down piece by piece it becomes clear how something so small can carry such monumental worth. Because by 1988 the U.S. Mint was still operating under lingering effects of major metallurgical changes that had begun earlier in the decade when rising copper prices forced a shift from mostly copper pennies to zinc cores with thin copper plating, and even though the official transition happened in 1982, the following years were filled with leftover stock usage, test batches, internal experiments, and inconsistent material handling that created an environment where wrong metal errors became not just possible but inevitable, and this is where one of the biggest value-driving factors of the 1988 cent comes into play. Because if a genuine 1988 penny were ever found struck on a solid bronze or copper planchet intended for earlier decades, its weight, sound, density, and color would immediately expose it as something completely out of place, and that alone would catapult the coin into six-figure territory before any other errors were even considered. But now imagine combining that wrong metal with a dramatic off-center strike that cuts into the date, Lincoln's profile, and the rim in a way that makes the coin look like it barely survived the minting press. And suddenly the value climbs even higher because collectors don't just pay for one mistake, they pay exponentially when multiple rare mistakes coexist on the same surviving specimen, and that's only scratching the surface because die errors from that period were particularly unstable due to aggressive high-speed production schedules and reduced maintenance cycles, which means that cracked dies, shattered dies, cuts, retained die breaks, and heavy die clashes were far more likely to occur than during calmer production eras, and if a 1988 cent were struck from a die that had fractured so severely that chunks of the design were missing or distorted beyond recognition, it would create bold raised blobs of metal where design elements should be, making the coin look like a warped relic from an alternate minting reality. And those kinds of visual anomalies are exactly what collectors of extreme mint errors compete fiercely for because they represent irreversible moments of mechanical failure that can never be replicated again in precisely the same way. And when you add in the possibility of a dramatic double strike where the coin was struck once, shifted position, and struck again with full force, creating a ghostly overlapping image of Lincoln's face and the lettering, you start to understand how the value curve begins to bend sharply upward into seven figures under the right conditions, and the story becomes even more intense when you consider blockage errors, where one coin becomes stuck to a die and impresses a mirror image of its design onto another blank, producing a haunting reversed ghost of Lincoln on the wrong side, a phenomenon so visually stunning that it instantly becomes a centerpiece item in any error collection, and when blockage combines with off-metal composition and extreme die failure, the result is not just rare, it is practically mythical, and that's why the theoretical $4 million valuation for a 1988 cent is not based on fantasy but on layered probability where each individual mistake is already rare on its own and the chance of them occurring together on a single surviving example is astronomically low, and this is compounded further by the fact that 1988 was a year with massive overall penny production numbers, meaning billions of coins were struck, which paradoxically increases the chance of rare errors existing while also making the normal examples so common that people never bother to examine them closely, and that is precisely how world-changing coins vanish into everyday circulation unnoticed. Because when billions of identical coins exist, the human brain stops treating them as meaningful individual objects, yet within that sea of sameness can exist one singular coin forged through accident after accident that turns it into a once-in-a-generation artifact. And another powerful value driver involves transitional alloy errors where experimental planchets intended for foreign coins, tokens, or tests accidentally entered the penny production stream, creating coins with magnetism, abnormal thickness, or unexpected coloration, and if a verified 1988 penny were discovered to be struck on such a foreign alloy blank, especially one that left no official production record, the numismatic world would explode with excitement because it would rewrite part of the historical manufacturing narrative of the U.S. Mint itself, and beyond metal and strike errors. There are also dramatic rotated die errors where one side of the coin is turned at an extreme angle relative to the other, sometimes nearly upside down or sideways, creating a disorienting visual contradiction that proves something went terribly wrong during die installation. And while mild rotation is collectible, extreme rotation combined with other anomalies pushes the value into astonishing territory. And then there are the legendary mule errors where mismatched dies from different coin types are paired together accidentally. An impossibility under normal quality control systems, but something that has happened in rare, legendary instances throughout history. And if a 1988 cent were ever confirmed to be a true mule with a non-penny reverse never intended for it, the financial world outside of numismatics would suddenly take notice, because such an object would not just be a coin but a documented industrial impossibility made real, and the reason collectors, investors, and museums would be willing to pay millions for such a piece is because it would represent the collapse of multiple safety systems at once, something that simply should not exist, and when impossible objects appear, they command impossible prices, and beyond the mechanical side of things there is also the psychological and historical magnetism that draws buyers into bidding wars where logic dissolves and competition takes over, because once 2 or 3 elite collectors decide they must own a particular legendary error, price becomes irrelevant and the only thing that matters is winning, and this is how records are shattered, because value in numismatics is not built only on metal and mistakes but on narrative, prestige, fear of missing out, and the desire to possess something no one else on earth can own, and the 1988 1 cent, under the right convergence of documented catastrophic mint errors, sits perfectly within that psychological storm. And what makes this even more compelling is that the vast majority of people alive today have likely handled dozens if not hundreds of 1988 pennies without ever considering that 1 out of billions could be a financial time bomb waiting to be discovered. And the tragedy and beauty of rare coin errors is that some are recognized instantly and preserved forever while others are destroyed unknowingly in circulation, flattened on railroad tracks, eaten away by corrosion, or lost in disasters long before anyone understands what they were. And that means the true population of ultra-extreme error pennies from 1988 may be unknowable forever, which only increases the mystique and drives prices higher for any confirmed survivor. And when professional grading services examine such coins, they don't just look for authenticity but analyze strike pressure, flow lines, metal displacement, weight tolerance, die alignment, edge integrity, microscopic plating fractures, and internal stress patterns within the metal itself to determine whether the coin was created by the mint or manipulated later, and passing those tests with a genuine extreme anomaly stamp instantly transforms an object worth 1 cent into an object worth millions, and even then the grading number itself can make a 6 or 7-figure difference because condition. Next 1990 D 1 cent coin, the channel everyone, and a huge thank you for tuning in today, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you look at the smallest coin in your pocket, the humble penny, because today we are diving deep into the astonishing and almost unbelievable story of the 1990 D 1 cent that under the rarest and most extreme conditions of minting chaos, mechanical failure, metal confusion, and production error could reach a staggering valuation of up to $3 million, and the truly mind-blowing part is that millions of people across America and beyond have likely held this exact year of penny in their hands without ever realizing that one freak example among billions could be worth more than luxury homes, supercars, and lifelong salaries combined. And to understand how such a seemingly ordinary coin could climb to such an impossible level of value, we must first place ourselves inside the industrial heartbeat of the United States Mint. At the turn of the 1990s, a period defined by relentless production speed, aging equipment, massive national demand for coinage, and lingering aftershocks from earlier metal composition changes that had already transformed the penny from solid copper into a zinc core plated with copper, and even though the official transition had been completed years earlier, The reality inside the mint was far messier than most people imagine because leftover stock, experimental blanks, mixed alloy deliveries, and testing batches flowed through the system in ways that created opportunities for chaos to enter the production line unnoticed, and it is within this environment that the possibility of a legendary 1990 D mint error penny begins to emerge, because the Denver Mint, which is identified by the D mint mark beneath the date, was operating at an enormous output capacity, striking hundreds of millions of coins with automated systems that could not always catch every anomaly, and when even a tiny deviation occurred, it could cascade into dramatic visual and physical transformations on a coin that was never supposed to exist in that form, and one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities for a 1990 D cent lies in the realm of wrong planchet errors. Because if a penny intended to weigh just 2.5 grams on a zinc core were instead struck on a solid bronze blank left over from earlier years or mistakenly mixed into a hopper of penny planchets, the resulting coin would instantly feel different in the hand, with heavier weight, a deeper ringing sound when dropped, and a richer, warmer coloration that no normal 1990 D cent should possess, and this alone would place the coin into elite numismatic territory. But the $3 million valuation enters the conversation only when this wrong metal composition combines with other extreme errors that multiply rarity rather than merely adding to it. And among those compounding factors are dramatic off-center strikes where the blank was not seated correctly beneath the die and the design crashed partially onto empty space, leaving entire sections of Lincoln's portrait, the date, and the inscriptions missing while creating a crescent of exposed raw metal along one edge. And when such an off-center strike exceeds 40 or 50% with a visible full date, it becomes exponentially more valuable because it crosses from minor curiosity into extreme mechanical failure evidence, and then when you layer on the possibility of a double strike where the coin was hit once, shifted slightly, and struck again, you begin to see ghosted images of Lincoln's face overlapping itself, doubled letters stretching into shadows, and rims that no longer form a perfect circle but instead ripple like frozen waves of molten metal, and each additional layer of visual distortion confirms that the coin's journey through the minting press was anything but normal, and one of the most visually dramatic possibilities that drives collectors into bidding wars is the brockage error, a phenomenon that occurs when one freshly struck coin becomes stuck to a die and then impresses its reverse design onto the next blank that enters the striking chamber, creating a haunting mirror image of Lincoln's face and inscriptions on the wrong side of the coin. And if a genuine 1990 D cent were discovered displaying a perfect brockage combined with wrong metal composition and extreme strike distortion, it would instantly become one of the most talked about error coins of the modern era, because such a coin would not merely be rare, it would be a visual shockwave that tells a story of split-second industrial failure frozen in metal forever. And beyond brockage, the world of die errors opens another massive realm of possibility where value can explode into seven figures, because dies are the hardened steel tools that carry the engraved designs used to strike coins. And over time, under immense pressure, they crack, fragment, clash together, and even shatter in catastrophic ways. And when a cracked die strikes a coin, it transfers raised lines of metal across the surface where no lines should exist, but when a shattered die strikes a coin, it can leave massive raised blobs known as cuds that swallow entire letters, numbers, or even portions of Lincoln's head beneath featureless waves of metal, and such extreme die breaks are especially prized when they are large, bold, and visually unmistakable because they represent the moment a tool designed to create perfect images instead collapsed under its own stress. And if a 1990 D penny were struck by a die at the exact moment of catastrophic failure while also being on the wrong planchet and struck off-center, its existence would represent a convergence of improbabilities so extreme that only one or two such pieces could logically exist in the entire world. And it is precisely this level of layered improbability that fuels valuations reaching into the millions. Because collectors are not just buying a coin at that point, they are buying a once-in-a-lifetime industrial accident that cannot be replicated by human hands even if someone tried. And then there are the legendary die clash errors where the obverse and reverse dies smash into each other without a planchet in between, transferring ghostly echoes of the opposite design onto each side of the coin, creating faint outlines of memorial columns across Lincoln's face or the profile of Lincoln bleeding through onto the reverse. And while minor clashes are fairly common, extreme multi-generation clashes combined with severe die cracks and rotation create coins that look almost haunted by previous strikes. And if a 1990 D cent carried these features in bold, undeniable form while also being compositionally wrong and violently misstruck. It would represent such a perfect storm of error types that its value would transcend normal price guides and instead be determined purely by elite collector competition, and one of the most mysterious and financially powerful categories of mint error is the mule, which occurs when two dies never intended to be paired together somehow end up striking a coin, such as the obverse of a penny with the reverse of an entirely different denomination or even a foreign coin. And true mules are among the rarest objects in numismatics because modern quality control systems are specifically designed to prevent such mismatches from ever occurring, and if a verified 1990 D penny mule were ever authenticated with the wrong reverse, it would instantly become global news within collecting circles and beyond because it would represent a total breakdown of production safeguards, and that kind of mechanical impossibility made real is exactly the sort of thing that drives valuations into the multi-million-dollar range. And then there are rotated die errors where the alignment between the obverse and reverse is twisted far beyond normal tolerances so that when the coin is flipped the opposite side appears sideways or completely inverted. An extreme rotation combined with other errors transforms the coin from a novelty into a documented production failure of historical importance, and in the realm of planchet defects we also find clipped planchets where the blank metal disc was improperly cut from the metal strip leaving curved or straight missing sections along the edge. And while single clips are collectible, multiple overlapping clips or dramatic interior clips combined with off-center strikes create coins that seem almost sculpted by chaos itself, and a 1990 D cent exhibiting a massive curved clip that bites deeply into the design while also showing wrong metal composition and double striking would be considered a masterpiece of error collecting. And beyond mechanical failures, the chemical and metallurgical side of minting also opens the door to enormous value potential because plating errors can cause zinc core exposure where the copper layer splits, bubbles, peels, or fails to adhere entirely, revealing raw gray metal beneath the surface, and while minor plating defects are fairly common, extreme split plating that curls outward like metallic petals or exposes vast regions of zinc while also interacting with strike distortion is far rarer and more dramatic. And if such a plating catastrophe occurred on a wrong metal planchet or during a violent off-center double strike, the visual complexity of the coin would escalate. Next 2022 D1 cent coin. To the channel everyone, and a massive thank you for joining me today because the story you're about to hear proves once again that unbelievable wealth can hide inside the smallest and most ordinary objects, and today that object is the 2022 D1 cent, a modern penny that most people spend without a second thought. Yet under the rarest and most extreme conditions of minting chaos, metal confusion, mechanical breakdowns, and production anomalies could reach a jaw-dropping valuation of up to $2 million. And the reason this sounds so shocking is because the year 2022 feels like yesterday to many of us, making it almost impossible to believe that a coin this new could already carry the financial gravity of a mansion, a fleet of luxury cars, or a lifetime of earnings. But when you truly understand how errors occur inside modern mints and how probability bends under massive production pressure, you begin to realize that modern coins can sometimes be just as dangerous to overlook as ancient treasure, because the Denver Mint, marked by the tiny d beneath the date, was operating in 2022 under extraordinary global conditions shaped by economic disruption, supply chain instability, metal sourcing challenges, staffing strain, and unprecedented production demand driven by inflation, all of which created an environment where the systems designed to prevent catastrophic mistakes were under constant stress, and when systems are stressed, reality does not always follow design. And it is in these tiny fractures of control that legendary errors are born, because while modern minting technology is more advanced than ever, it is not immune to human oversight, mechanical failure, or material irregularities, and in some ways its sheer speed makes certain rare mistakes even harder to detect until it is too late. And one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities for a 2022 D penny lies in the realm of wrong planchet errors, because pennies today are supposed to be struck on zinc cores with a thin copper coating weighing approximately 2.5 grams, but if through some extraordinary material mixing failure a penny blank made of solid copper, brass, or even a foreign alloy intended for another denomination or another country entered the penny production stream, the result would be a coin with incorrect weight, density, sound, and electromagnetic response, instantly identifying it as something that should not exist, and wrong. Planchet errors are already rare in any era, but in modern highly automated production they become exponentially rarer, and rarity is the engine that drives value into the stratosphere, especially when the error is dramatic enough to be verified by advanced spectrographic metal analysis and weight tolerance testing, and if a 2022 penny were confirmed to be struck on a solid copper or foreign alloy planchet never intended for US 1-cent production, it would instantly become one of the most important modern era coins ever discovered, and that alone could push its value into six figures, but the $2 million valuation enters the conversation only when that wrong metal composition collides with additional catastrophic errors that multiply rarity instead of merely adding to it, and among those compounding factors the most visually striking are extreme off-center strikes, which occur when the blank is not properly seated within the striking collar and only part of the design is transferred onto the coin, leaving a dramatic crescent of blank metal where Lincoln's face, the date, or the inscriptions should be, and when such an off-center strike exceeds 40 or 50% while still preserving a readable date and mint mark, it becomes exponentially more valuable because it crosses from minor oddity into undeniable industrial failure. And now imagine combining that off-center strike with a double strike, where the coin is struck once, shifts position, and is struck again, producing overlapping ghost images of Lincoln's portrait, stretched lettering, distorted rims, and doubled inscriptions that look like echoes trapped in metal, and such coins appear almost alive with motion frozen at the exact instant of mechanical confusion. And collectors of extreme errors are drawn to these pieces not just because of their rarity but because of the visceral story they tell about what went wrong in the split second they were created, and one of the most haunting and visually dramatic modern error types is the brockage error, which occurs when a freshly struck coin becomes stuck to a die and impresses its mirror image design into the next blank that enters the striking chamber, producing a reversed ghost of the coin's design on the wrong side, and in the case of a 2022 penny this could manifest as a reversed Lincoln portrait or reversed lettering appearing where it should never exist, and if such a brockage occurred on a wrong metal planchet and was also off-center or double struck, the resulting coin would be a visual paradox so rare that it could not be priced by any ordinary guide, and this is exactly how objects begin to enter the million-dollar conversation, not through a single mistake but through a cascade of failures that stack impossibility on top of impossibility, and then we enter the world of die errors, which is where some of the most financially explosive anomalies are born because dies are the hardened steel tools that carry the engraved designs used to strike coins, and they operate under enormous pressure, heat, and stress thousands of times per hour, and over time they crack, fragment, clash, and sometimes shatter catastrophically, and when a cracked die strikes a coin it leaves raised lines of metal where no lines should exist, but when a die shatters it can leave massive raised blobs called cuds that obliterate letters, numbers, or entire sections of Lincoln's head beneath smooth, featureless metal, and these extreme die breaks are especially prized when they are bold and unmistakable because they represent the precise moment of tool failure captured forever in metal, and if a 2022 penny were struck during a catastrophic die failure while also being on the wrong planchet and violently misstruck, it would represent such a narrow window of mechanical collapse that its very existence would seem statistically impossible, and such statistical impossibility is what drives valuations into the seven-figure range, because collectors and investors are not just paying for rarity, they are paying for the collapse of probability itself, and die clashes add another layer of visual and historical intrigue because they occur when the obverse and reverse dies crash into each other without a planchet between them, transferring ghostly impressions of one design onto the other, and while light die clashes are relatively common, extreme multi-generation clashes combined with die cracks and rotation create coins that look almost haunted by previous strikes, and if a 2022 penny carried strong clash marks along with major die breaks, wrong metal composition, and strike distortion, it would represent a perfect storm of error categories colliding into a single artifact that could not logically be reproduced even if someone tried. And one of the rarest and most financially powerful categories of mint error is the mule, which occurs when mismatched dies that were never intended to strike together somehow end up paired in the same press, such as a penny obverse with a non-penny reverse, and true mules are legendary because modern quality control systems are specifically designed to prevent such mismatches from ever occurring, yet history proves that even the strongest systems occasionally fail, and if a verified 2022 penny mule were ever authenticated, it would instantly become global news across numismatics and beyond because it would represent a total collapse of production. Safeguards in the modern era, and that kind of mechanical impossibility made real, is exactly the sort of thing that causes prices to explode beyond logic and into the realm of record-breaking auctions. And then there are rotated die errors where the alignment between the obverse and reverse is twisted far beyond normal tolerances, so that when the coin is flipped the opposite side appears sideways or completely upside down. And extreme rotation combined with other errors transforms the coin from a curiosity into a documented production failure of historical importance. And in the world of planchet defects, there are clipped planchets where the blank metal disc was improperly cut from the metal strip, leaving curved or straight missing sections along the edge. And while single clips are collectible, multiple overlapping clips or interior clips combined with off-center strikes create coins that appear sculpted by industrial chaos itself. And a 2022 penny with a massive curved clip that bites deeply into the design while also showing wrong metal composition and double striking would be considered an elite-tier masterpiece of modern error collecting. And then we arrive at the chemical and metallurgical side of modern penny production, where plating errors can expose the zinc core beneath the copper coating, causing bubbling, peeling, splitting, and entire sheets of copper to detach or fold. Next, 1986 1-cent coin. To the channel everyone, and a huge thank you for joining me today, because what you are about to hear once again proves that life-changing fortune can hide inside the smallest and most overlooked objects on earth. And today that object is the 1986 1-cent. A penny so ordinary in appearance that most people would never imagine it could, under the rarest and most extreme circumstances, reach a staggering value of $1 million, yet when the chaotic reality of minting errors, metal mix-ups, mechanical breakdowns, and statistical improbability all collide in just the right way, even a single copper-plated zinc coin from the mid-1980s can become a financial miracle. And to truly understand how this is possible, we must step back into the industrial atmosphere of the United States Mint during the mid-1980s, a time when the country was still adjusting to the massive transition from solid copper pennies to zinc core cents with thin copper plating, a change that officially occurred in 1982 but continued to ripple through the production system for years afterward due to leftover inventory, supplier inconsistencies, experimental test batches, and human error layered on top of high-speed automation, creating an environment where anomalies were far more likely than most people realize. And the year 1986 sits in a particularly interesting position within this timeline because it represents a period where the newer zinc planchets had become standard, yet remnants of earlier materials, equipment calibration shifts, and quality control stresses still created opportunities for rare mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And it is inside these tiny cracks in precision that million-dollar pennies are born, because one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities for a 1986 penny lies in the realm of wrong planchet errors, where a coin is struck on a blank that was never intended for that denomination at all, and if by some extraordinary breakdown in sorting and handling a leftover solid bronze planchet from earlier years, or even a foreign alloy blank meant for an entirely different coin entered the penny production stream, the resulting 1986 1-cent would instantly feel heavier than normal, ring differently when dropped, and display a color tone that does not match standard zinc cents, and this alone would place the coin into elite numismatic territory. Yet the million-dollar valuation only becomes realistic when this wrong metal composition merges with additional extreme errors that multiply rarity rather than merely adding to it, and among the most visually dramatic of these are off-center strikes, which occur when the blank is not seated correctly within the striking collar and only part of the design is transferred onto the coin, leaving a dramatic crescent of empty metal where Lincoln's face, the date, or the inscriptions should be, and when the off-center shift exceeds 40% while still preserving a readable date, collectors recognize it as a true mechanical failure rather than a mild curiosity, and if that off-center coin is also struck on the wrong metal, its value jumps exponentially because the odds of both occurring together are so astronomically low that survival of even a single specimen borders on the impossible. And then the story intensifies even further when we enter the world of double strikes, where the coin is struck once, shifts position inside the press, and is struck again, producing overlapping ghost images of Lincoln's portrait, doubled lettering, stretched numerals, and distorted rims that appear to ripple outward as if frozen mid-motion. And these double strike errors carry enormous collector appeal because they visually narrate the chaos that occurred inside the press in a split second. And when such a double strike occurs on an already wrong metal, off-center coin, Rarity no longer increases in a straight line but instead explodes geometrically, pushing the coin towards 6 or 7-figure territory depending on condition and eye appeal, and one of the most haunting and visually mesmerizing error types that can elevate a 1986 penny into legendary status is the brockage error, which happens when a freshly struck coin becomes stuck to one of the dies and then impresses a mirror image of its design into the next blank that enters the striking chamber, creating a reversed ghost of Lincoln's face or reversed lettering on the wrong side of the coin, and when such a brockage is bold, complete, and combined with other catastrophic strike failures, the resulting coin can look like a surreal work of metallic art created by accident rather than intention, and this is precisely the kind of object that elite collectors dream of owning because it represents a frozen moment of total industrial confusion that can never be reproduced by human hands. And then there is the powerful world of die errors, where the very tools used to strike coins become the source of the most financially explosive anomalies, because dies operate under immense pressure and heat thousands of times per hour, and over time they crack, fracture, clash into one another, and sometimes shatter in dramatic ways, and when a cracked die strikes a coin it leaves raised lines of metal where no lines should exist, but when a die fractures severely it can leave massive raised blobs known as cuds that swallow entire letters, numbers, or portions of Lincoln's head beneath smooth, featureless metal. And such extreme die breaks are prized not just for their rarity but for the way they clearly document the breakdown of hardened steel under relentless mechanical stress, and if a 1986 penny were struck at the exact moment of catastrophic die failure while also being off-center and on a wrong planchet, the coin would represent a convergence of improbabilities so extreme that only one or two such examples could realistically exist in the entire world, and it is precisely this level of layered improbability that allows a 1-cent coin to cross into million-dollar valuation territory, and then we add die clashes into the equation, which occur when the obverse and reverse dies slam together without a planchet between them, transferring ghostly impressions of one design onto the other, creating faint outlines of memorial columns across Lincoln's face or reversed echoes of Lincoln bleeding through onto the reverse, and while light clashes are fairly common, extreme multi-generation clashes layered with die cracks and rotation create coins that appear almost haunted by previous strikes, and such complex die interactions dramatically elevate collector demand because they serve as physical documentation of repeated mechanical malfunction within the press, and one of the most mysterious and financially powerful categories of mint error is the mule, which occurs when mismatched dies that were never meant to strike together somehow end up paired inside the same press. Such as the obverse of a penny with the reverse of an entirely different denomination, and true mules are legendary because modern production systems are specifically designed to prevent such mismatches, yet history has proven that even the strongest safeguards can fail on rare occasions. And if a verified 1986 penny mule were ever authenticated it would become an instant world-class numismatic event because it would represent a total breakdown of multiple quality control systems at once, and objects born from such systemic collapse are exactly the kind that command million-dollar prices because their existence defies the rules of industrial logic, and then there are rotated die errors where the alignment between the obverse and reverse is twisted far beyond acceptable tolerances so that when the coin is flipped the opposite side appears sideways or completely upside down, and while mild rotation is collectible, extreme rotation combined with other errors transforms the coin into a documented production failure of historical importance, and in the world of planchet defects there are clipped planchets where the blank metal disc was improperly cut from the strip leaving curved or straight missing sections along the edge, and while single clips are interesting, multiple overlapping clips, interior clips, or dramatic crescent bites that intrude deeply into the design are far rarer and far more visually striking, and a 1986 penny with a massive curved clip that slices into Lincoln's portrait while also showing off-center striking and wrong metal composition would be considered a masterpiece of error collecting, and beyond the mechanical side of minting there is also the chemical and metallurgical dimension where plating errors can cause the copper coating of zinc pennies to bubble, peel, split, or detach entirely, exposing raw gray zinc beneath the surface, and while small plating flaws are fairly common, extreme split plating that curls outward like metallic petals or forms folded copper sheets across the surface of the coin is dramatically rarer, and when such a plating catastrophe occurs alongside violent strike distortion it creates a coin with layered visual complexity that instantly captures the attention of elite collectors and museums alike. And survival bias plays a massive role in the valuation of extreme 1986 penny errors because not every catastrophic. Last 1995 1-cent coin, to the channel everyone, and thank you so much for being here today, because what you are about to hear may completely change the way you look at the most ordinary coin in your pocket, the humble penny, because today we are diving into the astonishing and almost unbelievable story of the 1995 1-cent. A modern Lincoln penny that, under the rarest and most extreme combinations of minting errors, metal mistakes, mechanical failures, and production anomalies, could reach a staggering valuation of up to $6 million, and the most shocking part is that millions of people have handled 1995 pennies without ever imagining that a single freak survivor among them could be worth more than luxury homes, supercars, and lifelong earnings combined. And to understand how a simple 1-cent coin can reach such a breathtaking level of value, we must first step back into the intense industrial environment of the United States Mint during the mid-1990s, a time defined by enormous nationwide demand for coinage, relentless production speed, aging yet still heavily relied upon equipment, and the continued long-term consequences of the great metal transition that had transformed the penny from solid copper into a zinc core with thin copper plating just over a decade earlier. And even though the official transition was long completed by 1995, the reality inside the mint was still shaped by leftover materials, experimental test batches, calibration shifts, supplier inconsistencies, and the unavoidable presence of human oversight layered on top of high-speed automation, creating a perfect environment where rare and sometimes spectacular errors could slip through unnoticed. And the Denver Mint and Philadelphia Mint together struck billions of pennies in 1995, meaning that probability alone guarantees that incredible anomalies had to occur. But probability also dictates that only a microscopic fraction of those anomalies could ever survive long enough to be discovered and preserved, and it is this razor-thin survival window that transforms an error from a curiosity into a $6 million legend, because one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities for a 1995 penny begins with wrong planchet errors, where a coin is struck on a blank that was never intended for that denomination at all, and if through an extraordinary breakdown in material sorting and handling, a solid bronze planchet from earlier decades, a foreign alloy blank, or even a planchet intended for another U.S. denomination entered the penny production stream, the resulting 1995 1-cent would instantly feel heavier than normal, ring differently when dropped, and display a color and density that no standard zinc cent should possess, and such a wrong metal cent would already command enormous attention from professional numismatists. But the $6 million valuation only becomes realistic when this impossible composition merges with additional catastrophic errors that multiply rarity instead of merely adding to it, and among the most dramatic of these are extreme off-center strikes where the blank was not seated properly within the striking collar and only part of the design was transferred onto the coin, leaving a bold crescent of raw metal where Lincoln's face, the date, or the inscriptions should be. And when that off-center shift exceeds 40 or 50% while still leaving the date and mint mark visible, collectors recognize it as a true industrial failure rather than a mild novelty. And if that same off-center coin were also struck on the wrong metal, the odds of its existence would already be so small that even one surviving example would feel statistically impossible. Yet the story does not end there, because now we enter the electrifying world of double strikes, where the coin is struck once, shifts position inside the press, and is struck again, producing overlapping ghost images of Lincoln's portrait, stretched numerals, doubled lettering, and distorted rims that look as if the metal itself tried to move out of the way of the machinery and failed. And these double-strike coins are especially prized because they visually tell the story of mechanical confusion frozen in time, and when double-striking combines with off-center striking and wrong metal composition, rarity does not increase in a straight line but instead explodes exponentially, pushing the coin far beyond normal price guide logic and into the realm of open-ended auction warfare. And one of the most haunting and visually arresting error types that can elevate a 1995 penny into true legend status is the brockage error, which occurs when a freshly struck coin becomes stuck to one of the dies and then impresses a reversed mirror image of its design onto the next blank that enters the striking chamber, resulting in a ghostly inverted portrait of Lincoln or reversed inscriptions on the wrong side of the coin. And when such a brockage is bold, complete, and layered with off-center striking, double striking, and wrong metal composition, the resulting object can look more like a surreal piece of metallic art than a coin, and this is precisely the type of object that elite collectors will chase without regard for price because it represents a moment of total industrial breakdown that cannot be recreated, replicated, or forged through human intent. And then we step into the enormously powerful realm of die errors where the very tools used to create coins become the source of some of the most financially explosive anomalies ever recorded, because dies operate under enormous pressure and heat thousands of times per hour, and over time they crack, fracture, clash into one another, and sometimes shatter in catastrophic fashion, and when a cracked die strikes a coin it leaves raised metal lines across the surface where no lines should exist. But when a die fractures severely it creates massive raised blobs known as cuds that swallow entire letters, numbers, or even portions of Lincoln's portrait beneath smooth, featureless metal, and such extreme die breaks are highly prized because they represent the exact moment a hardened steel tool failed under relentless mechanical stress, and if a 1995 penny were struck at the exact instant of catastrophic die failure while also being off-center and on a wrong planchet and possibly double-struck, that coin would represent a convergence of industrial failures so extreme that only one or two such examples could logically exist in the entire world, and it is precisely this level of layered improbability that allows a 1-cent coin to leap into multi-million-dollar valuation territory, and then there are die clash errors, which occur when the obverse and reverse dies slam together without a planchet between them, transferring ghostly impressions of one design onto the opposite side so that faint outlines of the Lincoln Memorial appear across Lincoln's face or reversed. Fragments of Lincoln bleed through onto the reverse, and while light die clashes are relatively common, extreme multi-generation clashes layered with severe die cracks, cuds, and rotated alignment create coins that appear almost haunted by the echo of previous strikes. And such complex die interactions elevate collector demand dramatically because they serve as physical documentation of repeated mechanical malfunction inside the mint, and one of the most mysterious and financially powerful categories of mint error that could instantly launch a 1995 penny into global fame is the mule, which occurs when mismatched dies that were never intended to strike together somehow end up paired in the same press, such as the obverse of a penny with the reverse of a completely different denomination or even a foreign coin. And true mules are among the rarest objects in all of numismatics because modern production safeguards are specifically designed to prevent such mismatches, yet history has shown that even the most sophisticated systems can fail under extraordinary circumstances, and if a verified 1995 penny mule were ever authenticated it would immediately become a once-in-a-lifetime numismatic event because it would represent a total collapse of multiple quality control layers at once. And such system-breaking objects are exactly what command prices that defy conventional logic and reach into the multi-million-dollar range, and then there are rotated die errors where the alignment between the obverse and reverse is twisted far beyond acceptable tolerances so that when the coin is flipped the opposite side appears sideways or completely upside down, and while mild rotation is collectible, extreme rotation combined with other catastrophic errors transforms the coin into a historically significant failure rather than a novelty. And in the world of planchet defects there are clipped planchets where the blank metal disc was improperly cut from the metal strip, leaving curved or straight missing sections along the edge. And while single clips are interesting, multiple overlapping clips or dramatic crescent bites that intrude deeply into the design are exponentially rarer and far more visually striking, and a 1995 penny with a massive curved clip that slices into Lincoln's portrait while also showing off-center striking, double striking, wrong metal composition, and die failure would be considered a masterpiece.